Eleven Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George. It is officially game week. We are ready. We are raring.
Goody.
I'm excited. I think it'll be fun. I also am not super convinced that the outcome will be great, but I'm still excited. I think it's a unique, cool thing that we haven't seen in college football before, and I don't know. It's hard not to be a little bit pumped for it. I think, even if you're not excited about maybe what might happen on the field.
Not a great way for me to start this show, but there are more potentially negative outcomes.
Do the
for
droopy
me with
dog
this
like
than
I don't think I like football at all.
that's been me for the last 2 weeks.
Fair enough.
But
The outcome
no,
of Ohio State's most recent game kind of would influence that.
Yeah, I mean, short of them totally running the Vols out of the stadium, it's going to be very hard for me to be emotionally thrust back into this season after.
Well,
that just happened.
we'll talk about how they'll do that in a second. We do want to start off the Dubcast this week with some awards. Not for myself, for George, but
not from the Dubcast.
Yeah, not from the Dubcast, but two Ohio State players. Probably most notably Seth McLaughlin getting the Remington Award as the nation's best center. I didn't know this about Seth McLaughlin. Obviously, I think just underlines the gravity of his loss on the offensive line, the fact that he was named the best center in college football. This dude had a 4.0 GPA, already had a bachelor's and a master's degree, and was like, people made him into a meme after a really bad game against Michigan, right, when he played for Alabama last season. But he had really, really done incredible things at that position and before he got hurt. So I think his Remington is definitely justified. Also, first team All-American with McLaughlin was Caleb Downs. Not a shock there. Didn't win the Thorpe. Feel like he could have, honestly. The level at which he'd been playing is incredibly high. But yeah, I mean, other guys were recognized, but I think those two kind of like jumped off the page. Was there anybody else? Was there anybody that you felt maybe should have been, I don't know, shouted out a little bit more nationally in terms of those awards?
No, I mean, I think that there's probably some candidates for OSU that maybe could have gotten a little bit more momentum if they had played in the conference championship game and if, things against Michigan had gone differently. Otherwise, I thought it was pretty straightforward. I did think it was funny that when Sports Illustrated put out their list of All-Americans, I don't know if it was the day the awards came out, but they had Seth McLaughlin as second team. And the guy that was first team was the center that plays for Tennessee.
Yeah, there you
go. I thought that was kind of amusing.
Yeah.
The other thing that I thought that was amusing relative to Seth was, earlier this season when we were, I think after the Oregon game, I made a comment to the effect of like, it's kind of hard to evaluate the performance of centers in some respects. And I was mostly saying that as somebody that played that position for 3 of the 4 years that I started in high school. So it was like, it's one of those positions, a lot of like the rest of the offensive line, where it's like, if they're not actively making mistakes, it's hard for people to assess how well they're doing, especially compared to like offensive tackles, where it's like if they're shutting off the defensive ends and pass protection or whatever, you're like, that guy's great.
Right.
Assessing interior blocking can be a little bit more complicated if you're not really in the weeds with it. And, there were a lot of people that were, at least that I noticed, that were Alabama fans that when McLaughlin announced he was leaving, they were just like,
yeah, good. See you.
Yeah, there was a lot of good riddance energy in terms of McLaughlin leaving last year, which made me not super encouraged about him coming in.
I wasn't either. I saw how he performed against Michigan. It was like, cool, we're gonna get the guy who like screwed up like 5 snaps and partially cost them the game. Like,
and it was especially too because Hinsman, even though he's since proven to be a better guard than center, Hinsman was one of the pleasant surprises on the offensive line last year when he was playing center, at least up until the bowl game when he got suspended for whatever reason. So it, I didn't really know what to expect going into this season with him. I think he had kind of a rep for, some shoddy snaps, like more than you would normally expect from a center of that caliber. So, but even according to people that were paying attention to him last season when he was on Alabama, people on the Alabama beat have acknowledged that like his improvement this year has been substantial. So I think that's another feather in the cap for Justin Fry. I know there's a lot of people that are not exactly thrilled with how his recruiting performance has gone, but I think we are in kind of a new environment in the same way that a lot of people have been trying to cling to optimism in wake of Ohio State's most recent result with, well, this is a new college football world we're in, and it's going to take people time to adapt to the new realities relative to their emotions and expectations. I think a similar thing can be said relative to talent acquisition, where if you're a high profile program like Ohio State is, if you haven't addressed every position in your team in every single recruiting class, you now have access to acquiring players that you need through the transfer portal in a way that may not be immediately obvious when, signing day is happening or whatever other time of the year it may be. So there's going to be targets that Ohio State has in the portal for their offensive line that they're looking at as we speak right now.
And so to that point, so I think how they do with those targets will say a lot about, Justin Fry and what his position in the team. But also I would argue that some of that, if you're talking about resources, right? Like everybody's talking about how much money Ohio State has put into NIL. Well, a lot of that's going to get freed up because you have a lot of these guys who are going to be going off to the NFL, graduating early, et cetera, whatever. Because of that, I gotta believe that a lot of that's at the head coach's insistence about who to go after and who to pay, right? Like they're the one who's really going to be crafting that strategy. So if Ryan Day says, all right, Justin Fry, we're going to give you, we want you to find some guys, but we're not going to give you nearly as much money, right, to play around with as we will to Brian Hartline or Jim Knowles or something like that, then that's not really on Justin Fry as much, right? So I think it's a more nuanced picture than Justin Fry can't recruit, because now you're talking about financial resources. And if those financial resources aren't being allocated in the same way that, say, Michigan might, right, where they want to offensive, defensive line, that's all they care about, right? That's their big targets, and obviously Underwood now at quarterback. Then I think I think that's a different conversation about Fry, because we don't know what kind of resources he's being given in relation to, wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, etc.
Well, I just coyly hinted at the fact that not the fact, but that we didn't know why Heisman didn't play in the bowl game last year.
Right.
The reality is probably has something to do with the podcast appearance he did, which yours truly reported many of the facts of, that then got cribbed up.
Yeah, we can't say for sure on that, but that seemed to be the case, yes.
One of the big thing, what I thought was the most surprising thing, the most eye-opening thing to me that he said in all of that not as many other people really picked up on relative to a lot of the other things that he said. He flat out said in that interview, Ohio State doesn't pay offensive linemen.
Right.
Just straight up.
That's right.
You had people that were going to Miami that were talking about getting $1 million offers from Miami to go there that, weren't really even seeing a down as freshmen. And Ohio State doesn't want to have anything to do with that.
Right.
We have reason to believe, based on the people that we know that are more familiar with the process, that that's not exactly the case. That, the fact that Ohio State has been in contention for recruits like David Sanders Jr.
Sure, right, yeah.
If they're top caliber prospects for their position and in their class generally along the offensive line, they're willing to pony up the materials to make competitive offers to players like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's for the less proven prospects that they are not willing to shell out competitive offers the way that they would in other places. Right. However, it does seem like they are willing to do that for portal targets. And the difference with portal targets relative to high school prospects is that you've got more information on
their known quantities.
Right. They're more known qualities, and you can more accurately assess their potential than you would coming out of high school. So I think the position Ohio State's in with that is that they're more willing to go after either known blue chip prospects at an early stage, or guys that are further along that may be closer to more finished projects that they are confident they can get the most out of. And that brings me back to why I brought this up to begin with Justin Fry, is that we have now seen him do that recently with not only Josh Simmons, who came in from San Diego State with being the rep as a penalty machine
Mm-hmm.
and has since turned into a mid to late first round, early second round pick in the
People
NFL
were really
draft.
skeptical about the Josh Simmons
projected.
transfer at the beginning. I mean, there were a lot of people around the Big Ten who were kind of making fun of it almost and saying like,
Yeah.
"How PFF doesn't grade this guy well? Like, how
we're
can
all
you do this?"
worried.
It's like,
We were like, what are they going to do at tackle? We were terrified.
right?
And we were saying that before Simmons got hurt.
Yeah.
But they figured it out. And that is credit to Fry developing that kind of talent. And so I think that even if he's not recruiting in-state or otherwise, the high-level caliber names that we would want to see as Ohio State fans, he has, I think, earned a little bit of benefit of the doubt relative to the guys they're getting that come in here, turning them into serviceable players along the offensive line. Because it's not only reflected in Simmons, but it's also reflected in Seth McLaughlin relative to what people that were paying attention to him when he was at Alabama were saying about him on the way out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, that's why the offseason is such a big deal here, because you're talking about trying to build depth through the portal, right? Well, that's fine. You can do that. But I also think that it's got to be a combination of both when you're talking about the offensive line and defensive line. Because I think one of the issues that Ohio State has run into, and you saw this year, is that, okay, your starting five are great. Like you've got it settled. But if you get injuries, who's behind them? And you're not necessarily paying those guys $1 million, right?
Yeah,
so
but
like,
I feel like that's a problem with every team, though.
It is.
You can't be 10 deep at every position.
You can't. But I do think that where people are frustrated is they're like, there shouldn't be that much of a drop off, right? Like from the 1 to the 2. Like you should be able to have a guy who can step in and be at least reasonably effective. And sometimes we didn't see that on the offensive line. I mean, when you're talking about like Zim Mikowski, for example, who comes in and looks like he has never played offensive line before, like that's not acceptable. Like that's not like,
well, again, Mikowski was such a weird case because he was serviceable in the Oregon game. And then when it came time for him to actually start against an inferior opponent,
he destroyed.
Yeah,
I mean, every play they had to pull him like 2 quarters in because they're like, this guy is not like he's completely.
But then you
lost.
wonder what went into it that he went into the Oregon game, and like it's not like they fell apart in the Oregon game.
No.
He was serviceable in relief,
and he was playing against a pretty good player too. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird case, but like I don't know that. I don't know. I guess when people see that, that's where they start to question Fry and whatnot. I think it's fair to ask about depth and what that's going to look like.
But then what happened the week after that?
Yeah, well, there you go.
They slid a guy over. They slid a couple guys over into different spots, and then they had their most impressive showing along the line all season.
Couple other things, actually, we can talk about this in relation to coaching. Russ Bjork, athletic director, gave Ryan Day a vote of confidence. Which. Yeah, I know that was kind of my reaction too. Like he said, he's absolutely confident that Ryan Day will be Ohio State's head coach next season. I'm sure you're going to say that.
Like, I'm absolutely confident right now.
That's right. I'm absolutely confident
Ask me
as
again
the words
in
are
a
coming
week.
out of my mouth. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you don't know what the boosters are going to be telling you. You don't know how angry the fans are going to be. You don't know how happy the boosters are going to. Like you don't know. You don't know. And I don't think as an athletic director at Ohio State, after a loss like they had against Michigan, that you can say definitively that any coach would be back next season, right? Like you really, like this is really Ryan Day. And even if it's not, even if Ross Bjork has made up in his mind that that's it, right? Like he's coming back, which makes, like, I understand why you would say that if you're him. Like you want a stable program, but you still don't know. You really don't know. You don't know how angry people are going to be in the aftermath of the Tennessee game. You hope not angry at all. You hope everybody's happy. But man, if you think, let me put it this way. If they come out and play the same way they did against Michigan and lose the same way, people will go ballistic. I mean, I don't know. I think that's it. Like, I don't think they can retain Ryan Day if nothing has changed after
No,
2
and
weeks.
that's
and
why
that
I
kind of
opened the
loss.
show the way that I did. There's more potentially bad outcomes for Ohio State in this game than good, even if
Sure.
they win.
Yeah.
Like scraping by in this game is still going to draw the ire of many. It's not all the people that are already calling for Day to be gone are
Yeah.
not going to be merely satisfied with them like
No, they're going to
winning
want to
by
see a
1
180 from
point
what they
or
saw
a
against
field
Michigan.
goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
No.
totally agree with that. So it's tough. It's real tough for Ryan Day right now, and he's really gonna have to prove that they learned something from that. But anyway, I just thought that was kind of funny because I had the same reaction you did. I was like, okay, like please ask him the same question in a week. That would be great.
I'm more upset about Bjork right now for another Ohio State coach decision that we'll perhaps talk about later in this show.
So yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. Well, another thing we can talk about the athletic department, Ohio State's pre-sale, they their code got cracked. The Tennessee Volunteer fans pulled out the Enigma machine and figured out the pre-sale
the
code.
Infamous Vols Twitter.
I think it was like OSU FB or OSU 24 or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But Ross Bjork's like, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of Vol fans there, and it's like, well, it's because you guys screwed that up. I don't know who was responsible for it.
They deployed the Rocky Top version of Connor Stallions to intercept our codes.
That's right. It's a dude in overalls and barefoot with a jug of moonshine with 3 X's on it, and his String Walker Coonhound.
Tennessee Volunteers.
Yeah, so that was ridiculous. I guess there's been a lot of tickets that the Tennessee Vols fans snatched up.
I think more than maybe the Ohio State brass wants to admit from the sound of it.
We're going to find out. We're going to see what it looks like on Saturday. They want to do the scarlet out the shoe. The team's going to be wearing the ketchups, so that'll be interesting. I don't hate the ketchups. It's fine. Red tops, red bottoms. I don't love it, but I don't hate it.
I didn't like them at all.
I think they're fine. I will say this: someone posted. I was looking in our message boards for like reaction to that. I was just curious what people were thinking. Somebody posted a video that had been uploaded to YouTube of Woody Hayes' first game as Ohio State head coach in, like, I think 1951. I want to say 53, something like that. And Ohio State was wearing all reds. They had red tops and red bottoms for his first game. And I was like, that's not a combination I would have expected at that point in time. But there you go. So maybe it's just a throwback to.
And then he was like, "We're never doing this silly nonsense again. Traditional pants and helmets."
Well, I'm mostly pissed that they're not doing the cool, the gray stripes on the shoulders.
It's all about the sleeves.
Yeah, it's really dumb they're not doing that. Also, another thing relating to this game that gave a little bit of momentum, I guess, this past week. So Representative Josh Williams, Ohio State Representative Josh Williams, introduced a bill in Ohio legislation to make flag planting illegal, which
absolutely ridiculous.
That is the softest, weakest, lamest crap I've ever heard in my entire. Now, we talked about this pre-show. Josh Williams out of Toledo. Is this a false flag situation? Is this an attempt to make Ohio State fans look stupid and weak and dumb?
I've spoken in, I believe, the Ask Us Anything segment of the show before about the senior marketing projects thing that I did when I was a senior at Ohio State. My critically acclaimed presentation by the
still impacting
the founder of Angie's List and the guy that went on to be the UC Davis Dean of the College of Business there.
There you go.
Very, very acclaimed presentation given by yours truly. The highlight of my academic career at Ohio State. One of the big
the highlight of my academic career is when I found like some pizza on the floor once and like ate it. I don't know.
Nice. One of the big things that I discovered from doing that, not as like a, this is going to be in a scientific journal or anything, but just one of the most personally enlightening things that I discovered from doing the research on that project was because it was a whole thing that was focused on the kind of brand resonance that Ohio State University had,
like their Q score or whatever,
in not even in the state of Ohio, but just in the immediate Columbus area. It was eye-opening to me how many people that live in the area not only don't have an affiliation to Ohio State, but actively dislike Ohio State,
Yeah.
in part because they don't have any affiliation to it and are annoyed at the presumption that they would have a favorable impression of
That's
Ohio
right.
State
That's right.
from
How
other
dare
people that
no,
went
and
to
how
Ohio
dare you
State.
ask?
Yeah. So
Right.
the fact that that exists within Columbus by itself made me realize, you know what? If it's this bad in the epicenter of where you would think the brand resonance would be largest, then that has to be a pattern that goes throughout the rest of the state itself. And we're talking about Toledo, Ohio. That is no man's land
That's right.
between Ann Arbor and Columbus.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, I'm sure house divided families, and I grew up in one, so I can speak on it. A lot of Michigan fans that live just over the border in that area, in the same way there are probably, more than a few Ohio State fans.
Mm-hmm.
But based on what I just told you, you have to imagine there's more people than not that have a not favorable opinion of Ohio State.
Oh, sure.
And Josh Williams did not go to Ohio State.
No, went to Toledo.
He went to Toledo.
Yep.
And representing that area, you would have to think, would it not put him in the good graces of the people that live in that area?
That's right.
If he were to introduce legislation
so he's gonna
would make a mockery of the Ohio State fan base.
He's going to get booed in Columbus, but he's going back to Toledo, and everybody's going to be like, good job, man.
He's a politician. It was a very calculated play.
It could be.
And I don't think he introduced that thinking it was going to get ratified or passed or anything.
No, of course not. No, he knows it wouldn't be.
He just did it for attention and as a bit, and it's going to get, and no publicity is bad publicity that doesn't involve felonious behavior. So if he's not doing anything legally wrong, he's just earning brownie points with the people in that area that don't like Ohio State. Right. It's a very calculated move by Rep. Josh Williams at the expense of Ohio State fans.
Yeah.
I blame Ryan Day for opening the door for it.
Well, there you go. Exactly. Ryan Day. Look, if Ohio State wins, it doesn't become an issue, doesn't matter. I hope Ohio State in the future will still be able to plant the flag on their own field without, any legal issues. But we'll see how that goes.
God, the funniest part of that whole thing, looking back, is still when the Fox camera cut over to Ryan Day while all the players were just openly
standing here, and just looking off.
What happened? No, he literally goes.
Yeah, he says,
"What happened?
Yeah,
what happened?"
It's a good question, Ryan. I've been asking that for the past, 3.5 hours. Yeah. Let's see.
Everybody knows what's going on the field except for you.
Yeah. That was ridiculous, and that legislation is ridiculous. So obviously no chance of actually passing, but whatever.
I hope not. I guess crazier things have happened in the state house.
Tell me about it. Here's the other thing. We have a couple minutes here. We were talking a little bit about like the weather and the weather forecast and whatnot. I just want to say this. I want to make one point, I think, abundantly clear. I have not seen one person genuinely assert that Tennessee would be seriously impacted by the weather. Like, I have not seen an Ohio State fan be like, oh, this is going to take them down. Like, they can't play in this weather. I have not seen that. I have, however, seen thousands of people say, I can't believe other people are saying this. And that's what's crazy to me. Like, I understand that, it gets cold in Tennessee. I don't think it's going to matter for either team. And frankly, it's probably going to be more of a benefit if it's really cold for Tennessee. Because
I don't think it's going to be a benefit for either team.
Yeah.
I think everybody's going to be having an unpleasant time.
Yeah. It's going to be cold as hell. And it's one of those things that just really, really bugs me leading into games where fans get so reflexively defensive about something that nobody is actually saying. And I'm like, I can't, if someone can find it, if somebody can say where somebody was talking about how the cold weather would negatively affect Tennessee, I'll say, okay, I was wrong, mea culpa, whatever. I have not seen that from Ohio State fans. I have not seen that from the media. I've seen a lot of Tennessee fans inventing it in their head and pretending like that's a thing. And it's really dumb. Because also it's going to be cold, cold as balls. It's going to be so freaking cold. Yeah. And I saw another thing on.
I don't envy anybody going to that game.
I don't. Yeah, it's going to be in the teens. The wind chill is probably going to be like low teens, around 12 or 13. Not fun. However, I did see this one thing kind of cracked me up. So I've been looking at the Tennessee message boards a little bit just to get, kind of where they're at and whatnot and their vibes.
Because you're a normal, well-adjusted person.
Yeah, exactly. Just like the people on the Tennessee volunteer boards. One guy was saying, I don't even know what people are concerned about. It's going to be 40 and like 43 and maybe some drizzle.
Oh,
he was
I don't
looking
know
at
about that, Chief.
today's forecast.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, what are you talking about? It's like, no. Everybody's crazy. I don't understand what they're saying. No, it's in Ohio today. It was like, and yesterday it was like 40s and 50s and rainy. In a week, it's going to be lower 20s and cold as heck. So make of that what you will. But I don't like, I'm with you. I think both teams will be impacted by it equally. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference either way. But I'll forget I ever said that in case Ohio State like beats the crap out of them or something. Like, these Southern boys.
Or if they show up with Gatorade vats full of broth and hot chocolate.
You know what? And that's the other thing. When you show up to a 53-degree game with soup and hot chocolate between LSU and Arkansas, you said, it's gonna engender a little bit of perception that these Southern boys can't play in colder weather. And again, I know Knoxville gets cold. They had the picture of their players doing a morning practice in snow. I'm not saying it doesn't get cold. I get it. I'm just saying the perception is there because there's a precedent. So I don't think it'll impact either team. I think it's silly. I think it's overblown. I also don't think Ohio State fans disagree with that. I have not seen that.
When your fans are willing to participate in the sort of incestuous culture that the SEC invokes upon itself, your people on the outside looking in are willing to thrust stereotypes that may only apply to certain teams within the conference across the entire conference.
There you go.
So
there you go.
That's why we would make that assumption. But Knoxville's not terribly far away from Columbus.
No,
I've made that drive before. So it stands to reason that they would be ready to deal with similar climates to what Ohio experiences during the colder months.
I think they'll be fine.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to do Ask Us Anything here. We do want to remind you beforehand, though, that you can, if you are cold up here in Seabus or wherever you might live,
it's cold in South Carolina right now, too.
Well, there you go. I don't know. Get one of those polar vortexes coming down. The dry goods store at 11warriors.com, drygoods at 11warriors.com has all kinds of great stuff for you to stay warm, including our very nice knit hat, which I wore this past week because it was really cold again. And I forgot how warm it is. And I was like sweating walking around in the store. I was like, this is gross. So anyway, my point is that it works.
Other than that, it's great.
That's great. No, that's the point. It keeps you extremely warm. It does its job.
Keeps you nice and sweaty.
That's right. Nice and sweaty. All right, so let's go ahead and do Ask Us Anything. You can ask us anything by sending questions to dubcast at 11warriors.com. Let's hear from Joe to start off with. Sitting here watching Army versus Navy because it's the only college football on Saturday made me appreciate that you guys continue the Dubcast postseason to get me through the dark times. The dark times are the period post-college football. Rarely do the Bengals make it past December. I know. And before bogus preseason NFL games start and the mostly sunless here in Southern Ohio, what gets you through the dark times without football? Women's hockey gets me through the dark times without football. Ohio State has an elite women's hockey team, and they're my favorite thing right now. So there you go.
Well, this is funny timing of this question because the last UFC event for the year happened this past Saturday.
Oh, really?
And then
when do they start up again? Like I wasn't aware they had an off season.
What's that thing? There is no off season,
right.
But they do take they take the holiday break. Okay, so they're done until the next event is going to be January 11th.
Okay.
But they did like 42 events this year, and there's 52 weeks during the year. So they like every other month there's like a week-long break. And they take off for Thanksgiving, and they do like 2 events in December, and then they take the rest of the month off. And the first week in January is usually off too. Mm-hmm. But other than that, there's like a pay-per-view every month at least.
That's a lot.
And there's like usually 2 or 3 fight night events every month as well. So that has become kind of a rock for me the last couple of years in terms of almost always having something to look forward to in sports during the week. And it's a great hedge too for Saturday night, because it's like, oh, if I don't have, social plans or obligations or something, I have that in my back pocket that I can go enjoy.
That makes sense.
And it's a great, it's especially great during college football season when you get like a bye week for Ohio State or something. You're like, oh my God, I'm not going to get my fix. And I've been so used to it for like the last 4 weeks. It's like, oh, I actually have this to look forward to this weekend instead. And it's great. So I'm not just pushing it on you because it's become, I want to stop short of calling it an obsession, but it has become probably my favorite sport other than football within the last 3 years. And I can't recommend leaning on the UFC enough for getting a more habitual installment of sports in your life if you're looking for something to fill the void during the off season that football leaves.
Okay. I mean, the regular like, appointment viewing is something that I think is appealing to somebody. Like you want a season, right? You want the thing that you can rely on a regular
Seasons
basis.
year round.
Yeah, I'm just not into like fighting sports, but I respect the hell out of it. I mean,
I'm not. That's the crazy thing for me is that I think boxing's stupid, honestly, but there's something enchanting about MMA, dude. Right. It's violent chess, It's like, let's take all these other sports that are like okay on their own and just roll them into one thing and then say, okay, here's some rules you can compete within. And it's like one thing's better than the other and something else counters that. And, whoever's the more well-rounded or better at implementing what they want to do.
I will also note, Joe, I'm also a denizen. Well, former, I was born and raised in the 513. I would love to say that the Reds get me through the dark times in the off season, but like the Bengals, they're pretty much done by like May or June usually. So there's, you have limited options at a certain point. I will say,
and I grew up a Cubs fan, so after 2016, I was like, all right, I need to just sign out on this while I can.
That's right. All right, this next one here is from Kevin, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in the podcast, but he says, if Ohio State wins 4 games in a row and the national championship, will it save Ryan Day's job and justify the season? Yeah,
I would think so.
Yeah, well, but this brings up a different question, because I think the obvious answer is yes, but this brings up a different question. How many games do you think Ohio State would have to win to A, save Ryan Day's job, and B, I guess, quote unquote, justify the season? In other words, make it a successful season in the eyes of Ohio State fans.
Well, here's the problem. Most people, I come from a different set of expectations from the beginning, from the off season coming into this season than most other people. A lot of people were expecting this team to win the national championship outright.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see them beat Michigan. They already didn't accomplish my goal. So at this point, everything else for me is gravy and isn't even going to be really what I wanted to see out of the team. In contrast, the people that expected this team to win the national championship, there's still hope for that. But I would have to think those people are going to be intrinsically unsatisfied if that doesn't happen, regardless of how far they actually get.
Right. So I think even if they beat Tennessee, they beat Oregon, but then end up losing the national championship, that would be like, all right, mission accomplished.
I think it's entirely dependent on what kind of a team they end up losing to if they do end up not winning out.
Yeah.
If they lose to a team like Oregon that they already beat. The problem with them losing to Oregon again is that you lost to them in their house by 1 point last time.
Right.
There's not really a way to have a better loss than that.
No.
So in any other circumstance you lose, you are presumably going to lose in more embarrassing fashion the second time,
right.
Even if it's only by a field goal.
A step back.
Yes. That is the one problem that I see with them losing to Oregon again.
I've had the same thought. Yeah.
However, if they play a team that's higher ranked than them in the semifinals, I don't necessarily know who that would be. I guess in their case, would it be Arizona State?
I guess, yeah.
Or are they on the other side of the bracket?
No, I think they're on the same side.
Okay. So even though Arizona State in the the rankings technically was not. I mean, it's tough to it's kind of splitting hairs, I guess, because it's like they get the conference championship thing, which is why they get thrust ahead or whatever. But
Sure, yeah.
I guess in the actual rankings, they weren't ahead because Ohio State was, what were they, 6th? Is that right?
I think they were 8th in the final rank.
8th?
Well, wait, no, they're 8th in the seeding. I think they were 6th in the rankings.
They were 6th in the rankings when they lost to Michigan.
Right.
Right. Okay. So I don't know how many other teams in their bracket, just off cuff, are actually ahead of them relative to what the rankings were. But if they were to lose to a team that was ranked ahead of them in the rankings, other than Oregon, then I think that there's at least a little bit of like, they were underdogs. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You want to see them win the national championship. It's disappointing, but we want to see them win the national championship every year. There's only one champion. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
If they get upset, though, by Tennessee or someone or another team that is perceived to be worse than they are, like you could make an argument Arizona State is, or if, the scenario I presented last week that would be very funny, which is the Clemson somehow goes on a fantasy run, meets Ohio State in the semifinals, and then avenges the 2020 game.
Right.
And then you tip your hat to Kyle McCord for opening that door.
Last thing
that's like a doomsday scenario.
Yes,
that's bad.
Correct.
So there's more potentially bad outcomes here for Ohio State than I think good ones. And that really stinks. Which is why I'm kind of already emotionally signed out.
I mean, for me, I think as far as Ryan Day's job goes, you got to win this game at least semi-convincingly, because the issue is it kind of compounds itself even if you do win the game. And like, let's say it's a slobber knocker and Ohio State wins by 1 point. Okay, cool. Like you get a like what, like a stay of execution basically, because then no, but for real though,
a great way to put
it is, because then what's going to happen is every fan's going to be like, cool, you barely got over the hump against the team you're supposed to beat, right? Because you're a 7.5.
Better not
favorite.
Screw up in another 2 weeks.
That's right, exactly. And so if they go out against Oregon and they don't win, then I don't think that a lot of those rumblings go away. Now, I do think it makes it easier for Ross Bjork to keep him around if he wins a game, but if they lose to Tennessee, and especially if they lose in embarrassing fashion, I don't know, man. I don't know what that does. Now, as far as what constitutes a successful season, for me, you gotta think you have to necessarily win a national championship at this point, but I think you have to beat Oregon. I think you have to take revenge. I know. I'm not saying they're going to. Ask. No, I'm not saying they're going to. You got to beat the team
nobody else has.
Criteria. No, I know exactly what you're saying, dude. But it's to me, that's what they have to do to constitute a successful season.
I agree with you,
because you've lost to Oregon once. By all rights, you should have beaten them. I mean, you had lots of opportunities to put that game away. You didn't. I think they should have won that game. And then, of course, you lose to Michigan, a team that you were favored by almost 3 touchdowns against. You win one of those games, pressure becomes a lot less, right? Obviously, if they lose to Michigan, still, even after beating Oregon, it's a big deal. But like, you can look at that. I think
they got outplayed by Oregon, but they were still in a position to win.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree with that. But my overall point with this is that you have not accomplished your 2 biggest goals this season, which was to take out the number 1 team in the Big Ten and get a championship, which you failed to do against Oregon, and then beat your rival in Michigan. I think the only way you can rectify that is to actually beat Oregon in the playoffs. And again, I don't think they're going to do it. But to me, that's what would constitute a successful season. So we'll see if they get there. I'm not super optimistic, but we'll find out. This last one's here from our good friend Alvin, who says, first of all, happy belated congrats on episode 500 last week. Cheers. Thank you, Alvin. Appreciate it. Who are you rooting for in the other bracket among SMU, PSU, so Penn State, Boise, Indiana, Notre Dame, and Georgia? Here's how I
big game. James is going on a run, baby.
Well, here's my rooting interest. So we've got Indiana at the top, right? Because it's Indiana. Slightly below that, not slightly, but somewhat below that, I would put Boise. Then a massive gap, and it would be like Penn State. And then like Journey to the Center of the Earth stuff, you put UGA and Notre Dame and SMU. They can all lose by 50 in the first game.
I can't root for Big Ten teams to do well. I don't want to see
I can root for this specific Big Ten team to do well. Let me put it that way. Especially since it's not Ohio State's part of the bracket.
No, I don't want to see Indiana. If you made me choose between Indiana and Penn State, obviously I'd rather see Indiana do well.
Well,
But
yeah. What about Indiana
they
Notre Dame then?
I honestly, out of all the teams I'm pulling for on that side of the bracket,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pulling for Notre Dame.
Really?
And I
Why?
can't. I
Why is
almost
that?
can't
Any
believe I'm
particular
saying
reason?
that. Well, it's
Is it just
you talk
relative
about
to the other teams?
well, you talk about the lesser of two evils.
Okay.
This is like the lesser of five evils. I don't want Georgia to win.
No, of
I
course
don't
not.
want either of the Big Ten teams to do well.
All right, I'm fine with that.
I don't find SMU evil, but at the same time, I cannot realistically see them winning at Penn State. So I don't even really entertain the notion of them making any progress in that at all. So then
SMU's
you're
like
left with
basically
Notre
where
Dame.
rich, dumb Southern kids go. Is what my impression is. Is that like if you're a rich, smart Southern kid, you go to Vanderbilt, but if you don't have the grades, you go to SMU. That's been my impression.
My brother wanted to go to SMU, so I think that they've got a little bit higher.
For him.
Well, he went to Denison.
Denison's a great college.
So, yeah.
Good for him.
He wanted to capitalize on the weight that the name Eisner holds around the halls
there
of
you
Denison.
Go. All right, fair enough.
There's no relation. Anyway, but I specifically in football terms, I don't see SMU winning at Penn State. So you want to talk about a team that's not equipped to handle the frigid conditions of the Big Ten?
Sure, yeah, but no, I mean Franklin better not screw that up. That would be
big game. James is back, baby. Anyway, so then you're left with Notre Dame, and I look at Notre Dame, and I want Marcus Freeman to do well, especially because if for some reason I know as we're recording this on Sunday night, Marcus Freeman just got a 4-year extension onto what is now a 6-year deal today. Yep. But if Ryan Day is suddenly dismissed or absent from being the head coach of Ohio State, I honestly don't know how many better candidates there are to take that job right now than that guy. He should at least be one of the top names that they try to convince to come over.
I mean, I know everybody's hot on Vrabel, but like I would put Freeman ahead of Vrabel. If I could pick anybody, I mean, give me a break.
So I would rather see a guy that could potentially be taking the reins for Ohio State eventually if Day is not here to do that job, do well, to feel more encouraged about that guy taking over than seeing that guy screw up early in the playoff, and then when we're potentially entertaining that guy as being head coach, it's like, do we really want to go with this guy that's really only gotten as far as Day has himself, in this new format?
No, that's a fair observation. So we'll see how it plays out. This
isn't like the Charlie Weiss era of Notre Dame where it's like, God, these people just piss me off.
That was pretty
so
insufferable.
Much,
I will say, I mean, I just really like the idea of like Kurt Signetti just stomping all over dudes and just being just an huge
makes Ohio State look better.
Oh yeah, it absolutely does.
But I feel like Signetti's going to do enough of that in the coming years that it's like
fair enough. I mean, I think that Notre Dame Indiana game is going to be a banger. I'm really excited.
We said it last week. It's the one we're most looking forward to in the first round.
I'm super excited about it. Awesome. All right, that's Ask Us Anything. Yeah, that's Ask Us Anything for this week. Thank you for sending those questions in. We'll keep answering them. I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about next week. We're going to do this real quick. So Garrick he was forecasting all the winners of all the bowls. So we're going to do the same thing. And
it's a tall task.
Yeah. And I want to give a quick disclaimer here. Garrick actually did research and tried to figure out who would win. I don't know who half these teams are. I'm just going to go off vibes for most of them. So let's do that. So a couple of one of these has already been played. The Salute to Veterans Bowl, which I think wasn't that the game where one of the referees actually did salute to veterans.
Yes.
So
no, I think that was an FCS playoff game or whatever. Okay. Yeah.
Well, anyway, South Alabama was the pick from Garrick. That's who ended up winning. So good for him. He's 1-0 so far. He's
They
only
were
got like.
they were decent this year. That's who I would have picked too.
All right, there you go. All right, we got the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl, Memphis versus West Virginia. West Virginia getting their mojo back with Rich Rod.
Scooters Coffee.
The Scooters Coffee Frisco
Is Rich Rod
Bowl.
going to be coaching for that game?
I don't think so.
It's in 2 days.
Yeah, I don't feel like that would be super wise. Memphis versus West Virginia. I say Memphis because they have a better record. I don't know. Who do you say?
It's a tough call. I think I'd probably say Memphis as well, just for the fact that West Virginia just hired a new coach that might not actually be present, and there just might be a little bit more dysfunction around there.
All right, Boca Raton Bowl on the 18th, Western Kentucky versus James Madison. I assume that takes place in Boca Raton. I'm going to say Western Kentucky because the Hilltoppers were supposed to be good a couple years ago, and I don't remember anything about them after that.
I can't pick against the Grip and Sips.
Oh, well,
it's got to be WKU.
All right, there you go. Art of Sport LA Bowl. Cal versus UNLV. UNLV, their coach Barry Odom left for Purdue, so he's not going to be there. I'm still going to say UNLV is going to win. Cal was like the meme team for a few games earlier this season, but then they kind of fell off the map, and it's less fun now. So I'm going to say UNLV.
Yeah, they were the meme team when they had a 3-score lead over Miami and then totally blew it.
Right. Then they also lost to Florida State somehow, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
R&L Carriers New Orleans Bowl, Georgia Southern versus Sam Houston. I don't know either of those teams at all, but Sam Houston was the name of a guy, so I'm going to say Sam Houston.
I'll say Georgia Southern. Sam
right,
Houston, cool. They I don't know. They're still relatively new to FBS. Their strength of schedule isn't super great. So give me Georgia Southern, who's got a little bit more established presence among the FBS subdivision, if you will.
Go.
And I'm also taking UNLV. You cut me off.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
My pick for the last one.
Cure Bowl. This is Ohio versus Jacksonville State. First of all, I believe this is taking place in the backyard of the Mayo Clinic. That's why it's called the Cure Bowl. That's not true. I don't know. I'm picking Ohio because it's Ohio. I'm not picking against my own state. Give me a break. Come on.
I'll take Ohio as well.
All right, there we go.
Jacksonville State, not bad, but
hey, and if Ohio is good enough, if Ohio is good enough for Timothy Chalamet, then he's good enough for Johnny Ginter. That's all.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is that like they were underdogs into that Miami of Ohio game, and Miami of Ohio had a ton of really good momentum, and Ohio just totally spanked them.
They did.
Totally whitewashed them.
Which rules?
It got good momentum going into that match.
I agree. Gasparilla Bowl, which I still am not entirely clear what that's all about, is I think it's just some Florida pirate thing. Florida versus Tulane. Tulane, I don't know. I'm going to pick Tulane because Florida, they're not going to be interested in playing the Gasparilla Bowl.
Tulane's best player portaled out. Their
Still
quarterback, so he's gone. I think he's going to Duke. And Florida, I mean, they had a really, really bad start to the year, and Billy Napier kind of rebounded them a bit. But I still can't imagine, based on the way that their season started, that there's a general feeling of satisfaction around that team to begin with. So I think they're probably going to play with a little bit more of an edge and chip on their shoulder to try to end on a positive note and have good momentum going into the off season. So I think Florida is probably going to take it there.
I agree. Myrtle Beach Bowl, Coastal Carolina versus UTSA, two teams with odd foul, bird related mascots.
Well, not only that, but Myrtle Beach Bowl, that's basically a home game for Coastal.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, it affected. I mean, well, they're listed as the away team, but they're effectively that's not even a road trip for them. Coastal's literally in Myrtle Beach.
Yeah. So there you go. So I'm going Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, Chanticleers all day.
Yeah. Idaho Potato Bowl, Northern Illinois versus Fresno State. Northern Illinois, give me a break. Come on, they beat Notre Dame. That's the only thing I know about either team.
They had that was a great win for them, but they've kind of fallen off a little bit since then. But Fresno State, I mean, you just think poorly of Fresno State because they couldn't get it done against Michigan.
Yes.
Let's be honest
Correct.
here.
Correct. I'm biased against any team that loses to Michigan.
Yeah. That's
Ohio State.
That's a tough call. I'll say Fresno State just to be a contrarian.
All right, that's fine.
It's a long trip for NIU to make it out to Idaho. So.
There you go. Hawaii Bowl, South Florida versus San Jose State. Speaking of long trips, South Florida has to go to Honolulu.
Yeah, I think you got to go San Jose State.
Yeah, I'm going to give them the several thousand mile advantage on that. All right, Game Above Sports Bowl. I don't know what the hell Game Above
also,
is.
that Hawaii Bowl is on Christmas Eve.
Oh my God! Give me
that's going to be.
It is on Christmas Eve.
Set of distractions.
That's terrible.
Those kids.
I hope they let them have fun. All right, Game Above Sports Bowl, Pittsburgh versus Toledo. Not in Hawaii. I don't know where the Game Above Sports Bowl is. I'm sure it's in like sunny Detroit.
I've never even heard of half of these sponsors.
Well, no, but that's always
the hell is Scooter's Coffee?
Did you know that you can buy? I just did a search here. You can buy Game Above merchandise. You can get your
I don't
your
even
matchup
know what
hoodie.
Game Above is.
I don't either. I still don't know, but I can buy merchandise for it. Where is this?
Well, you could buy from Game Above, or you could buy from the 11 Warriors dry goods store.
That's right. You know what? I just made a joke about how it's in Detroit. It is in Detroit. That's actually where it's at.
Where's the 11 Warriors dry goods store bowl?
That would take place in Jason's backyard, which he doesn't have, but it's fine. All right, Pittsburgh versus Toledo. I'm going to go Ohio team. Give me Toledo. Whatever.
Pittsburgh's better than their record indicates, but I guess they lost. Their quarterback was good, and they lost him, and that probably explains why they only finished 7-5. But I mean, remember, this is the team that gave Kyle McCord the worst performance of his entire
That's
career.
True. That's right. I forgot about that.
So they're good for a random game like that. I guess it's a tough call. It's a competitive matchup.
Yeah,
I'll go with Pittsburgh. I think they probably have played a higher strength of schedule than Toledo.
That's what Garrick said too, so that's fine. Rate Bowl, Rutgers versus Kansas State. I'm going to say Kansas State. Rate Bowl's in Phoenix. Yeah, that's Kansas State's been a consistently fine team this season. They haven't been great, but Rutgers have been all over the place, kind of trending down. So I'm giving that Kansas State.
I thought Kansas State was going to beat Iowa State, and they disappointed in that game, but it was relatively competitive, even though they were playing from behind for most of it. Rutgers, they kind of disappointed this year in some respects. So both teams, I guess, did, but I think Kansas State did to a lesser extent.
Right.
So I'll go with the Wildcats.
This next one, 68 Ventures Bowl. Again, I have no idea what 68 Ventures is.
Couldn't tab one more venture onto that and really make it a
I don't even know that they have
brand.
like a I'm trying to figure out. It doesn't even have like a link like on Wikipedia to I don't know, whatever. Anyway, this is in Mobile.
These are all just money laundering schemes.
That's what I've been anyway. I want to say like, oh, it's all a joke. I don't really believe it, but like part of me really believes it. This is Arkansas State versus Bowling Green. I'm not picking against an Ohio team. Bowling Green all the way by 100. There you go.
Bowling Green has one of the best tight ends in the country.
That's right, they do.
I don't really know what Arkansas State has, so
yes.
I'll say
he's amazing.
Bowling Green. Yeah, I'll say Bowling Green leans on the talent that got him there and gets the job done.
All right, Armed Forces Bowl, Oklahoma versus Navy. Garrick said Oklahoma. I think Navy's gonna put them in hell. I think Navy wins that game. They're just way too hard to deal with, and Oklahoma is, I don't know. They're all over the place.
It's a tough call. If Oklahoma was playing at home, I'd probably take them. But since this is going to be a neutral site game, Navy, just got a big upset over a ranked team in Army. I'll tentatively say that Navy gets it done as well.
All right, Birmingham Bowl, Georgia Tech versus Vanderbilt. I want to say Vandy just because, these are two teams that pulled off really fun upsets earlier in the season, but I think Georgia Tech's been playing better. So I'm going with Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I'll take Georgia Tech as well.
All right, Liberty Bowl, Texas Tech versus Arkansas. That's a first of all, that's a weird one, but I'm gonna say Texas Tech, TTU on that one.
Yeah, it's a tough call because there's two teams that I think kind of perform below expectations in similar respects. I know Texas Tech has been trying to, for like the last month, deal with the loss, I think, of their starting quarterback. So, and I do think Arkansas is better than their record indicates. I think Texas Tech might be a little bit worse than their record indicates. So I'll be the contrarian there, and I'll go with Arkansas.
Next one here, we've got Syracuse. This is the Holiday Bowl. Syracuse versus Washington State. Washington State has been really kind of sticking up the joint recently. They started out pretty well, and then the last 3 weeks they've just went on a 3-game losing streak, most notably to Wyoming. So as much as I would like to see Syracuse kind of get picked apart, pun intended, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Kyle McCord's going to throw like 5 touchdowns and 500 yards or something.
Every game I've picked against McCord this year, he's won, and every time I've believed in McCord, he's thrown 5 interceptions. So
there you go.
I know that I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't relative to picking Syracuse. So I'm going to pick against them again, against my better judgment, and say that Washington State pulls off the upset. But especially, and I'll say this too, it seems like McCord isn't fully invested in this game.
No, but he said
he is playing, but I think he's playing begrudgingly because he recognizes that he was criticized for not playing in it last year and quitting on Ohio State, and he was iffy about playing in it going into this next one. Right. And that criticism was starting to mount again, and so he decided to get out ahead of it and say that he was going to play in it.
It's for
I'm going to say, so I wonder how much he actually has his heart in it in terms of actually trying to win this. I'll say Washington State is more invested and gets the job done as a result.
Cool. All right. Texas A&M versus USC in the Las Vegas Bowl. USC has been ridiculous all season. I'm going with the Aggies on this one. I do not believe in USC at all this season.
No, it's been. You want to talk about a team that's performed below expectations? I mean, USC. Lord. It's been beyond comical. I don't know how you can trust them against competitive opponents in any game at this stage. Yeah, give me Texas A&M.
All right, next one here. This is on Saturday, December 28th. Fenway Bowl. Ooh, UConn and North Carolina. Got to impress that new coach, Bill Belichick. I think, I don't know. I still think North Carolina's got the better overall squad. I think they'll win that one.
It's another team that has been kind of playing below expectations all season, which is, part of the reason why Mac Brown is out of the. I mean, once you're like, 4 games into the season and you give up 70 points to, was it James Madison?
And
then your head coach says, well, if you guys want me to retire, I mean, I guess I can do that. And then you get to the end of the season and the guy's like, you know what, I'm not actually going to retire. And then the administration is like, no, you're done. We're moving on. So yeah, it's a weird situation there. I'll say UConn just because they're probably going to be more occupied with transition process to Belichick, and that'll just be kind of a distraction that I expect UConn not having to deal with as much of that will be more focused and gets it done.
All right, Penn State Bowl, Boston College versus Nebraska. I think BC gets this one. Nebraska has just been super. Again, another team that's just been all over the place, and they're not very good. So, yeah, I'm going BC. Especially.
They're all over the place, but you know what? I'll say that they play their best game, and I don't know.
By the way, I should be
keeping
track of all these. I'm not. So
no, I'm not either. But it's like
we can revisit it. It's fine.
We're just going off vibes.
There you go.
Someone and Ask Us Anything can hold us accountable if they really want to.
Yeah, there you go.
But I'm going to take Nebraska.
Okay.
I'm not saying they'll play their best game. What I mean is
to beat Boston College.
They'll play. In terms of the good cop bad cop routine they're doing. I trust that with the amount of time they have to prep, that they're going to be. They'll come out looking like a better version of themselves as opposed to a worse version of themselves, and that'll be enough to get over the likes of BC.
All right, cool. All right, New Mexico Bowl, Louisiana versus TCU. I'm going to Louisiana. I think that one's pretty straightforward. I don't know. I just think they'll be more gassed for it than TCU will be.
I think Louisiana lost their conference championship. So yeah, I believe they lost to Marshall. So I don't think they come into this with a ton of great momentum, and because they're not playing in as good of a conference as TCU, that they're not as tested. So I'll say TCU gets it done.
Pop-Tarts Bowl, the really the only other bowl that should exist besides the ones in the playoff. Iowa State and Miami. Did you see that the Pop-Tarts Bowl, their statue now, their trophy can actually toast Pop-Tarts?
I think that this whole fracas around this bowl game is just the most inflated. Like,
of course it is. Their marketing people are doing their jobs. They're working their asses off. I appreciate that. I appreciate the hustle.
It's like, I wonder how much the media and these influencers are getting paid by like Kellogg or whatever.
Probably a lot.
Like, you know,
but like
inflate the sense of worth around this game relative to what it actually deserves. I mean, yeah, you know, fun, all the mascot.
No one's allowed to have fun. No fun. Only serious things.
There's the two things from this season that have bothered me the most that people are going to say, oh, you're just, a sourpuss or whatever. I think that the national mourning around Kirk Herbstreit's dog has been absolutely ridiculous. I think that Kirk Herbstreit is well within his right to mourn the loss of his own pet that he considers a family member for as long as he needs to. That is his own personal burden to bear. But the amount of other people that shed tears for like the rest of the season over that dog, you need to get over it. The odds are it's an animal and you never met the animal to begin with. Like,
I'm gonna do that.
It's a dog. Their lifespan is not very long. Dogs pass away. You need to get over it. It wasn't even your dog.
I'm going to do that for Jasper on the Dubcast.
That and this hysteria around this stupid Pop-Tarts Bowl are the two things that have bothered me the most, that are largely inconsequential things that shouldn't bother me as much as they do from this college football season. I don't care who wins.
Who wins?
I'll say Miami does, just because Cam Ward is good for a
We've got a lot of games to go through. We got to do this quick. All right, Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl, Miami.
Are you kidding me?
No, yeah, I'm not kidding you. Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl, Miami.
I think Garrick made some of these up.
I'm not making these up. That's a real thing.
I didn't say you did. I said Garrick made them up because we're just reading them from
Miami of Ohio, by the way, is the team least likely to succeed in the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl. So I'm going with Colorado State. Because I know too much about Miami Oxford. So
Colorado State is coming into this off of a win against Utah State.
There you go. They're winning.
Miami of Ohio just had a huge letdown performance in the conference championship. Which is funny to State.
Military Bowl, East Carolina versus NC State. I'm going to give it to East Carolina because their mascot is.
Wait, hold on. Didn't you say you weren't going to pick against an Ohio school?
Except Miami.
Okay. I can understand fading J. Crew U instinctively.
That's right. Pop collar U, except Miami. Yeah. Who do you got? East Carolina, NC State, Military Bowl.
That's a tough call.
No, it's not. Just pick one.
It is a tough call. It's a fierce in-state rivalry game. Well, it isn't in-state. NC State. Maybe it is. I don't know. The Carolinas, they kind of blend together down here, Yeah. At least if you're from out of state and then relocated in here. If you're, from the area, you probably have more of a territorial sense.
Oh my God.
I'll say East Carolina gets it done because NC State hasn't been the same team without Grayson.
Alamo Bowl, BYU versus Colorado. Colorado's they're winning this. I know this is like ostensibly a pretty big game. Colorado's winning this.
The two teams that I've believed in this whole season when nobody else has are Arizona State and BYU, which is why it killed me when they had to play each other and I picked wrong. BYU are my darlings.
Okay. Independence
my
Bowl, Marshall
my
versus
beloved
Army.
Mormon children. I refuse to not believe that they get it done here against the false
right.
idols in Boulder.
There you go. The golden idol.
Yes.
Unlike golden tablets. Anyway, Independence Bowl, Marshall versus Army.
That was good.
Thank you. I want to see Army get to 12 wins. I want Army to get 12 wins. So there we go. We got it. Or no, Louisiana Tech's gonna. Marshall opted out. This is that whole thing. Yeah, Marshall opted out.
Yeah.
So like half the team like entered the
They're being
portal.
replaced by a 5-7 team.
Yeah,
so yeah,
Army's killing them. Army is going to destroy
Army
Louisiana
by
Tech.
$1 billion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Music City Bowl, Iowa versus Missouri. I kind of want Iowa to lose really badly, so I'm going to say Missouri. Even though I hate rooting for an SEC team. I don't know. Missouri, whatever. It's fine.
Well, yeah, and not only that, you hate rooting for the team that embarrassed Ohio State during bowl season last year.
Right.
Yeah, I can't support Iowa here. Give me Mizzou.
ReliaQuest Bowl, Alabama versus Michigan, which is really like, I'm sure Michigan won't care that they're going to lose by like 50 points in this game, but it's going to be really funny to me when they do. So obviously Alabama's going to win, and I hope it makes them at least a little mad. I hope Michigan gets a little upset by it.
Yeah, I'm not picking Michigan. Are you kidding
Tony
me?
the Tiger Sun Bowl, Louisville versus Washington. I'm going to say Louisville. Washington's kind of ass, so whatever.
I got to pick Louisville. Washington has let me. I wanted to believe in Washington this year, and even though they were able to get it done against Michigan, they let me down in almost every other circumstance where I thought they were going to win. So give me Louisville to beat a Washington team that performed well below expectations for most of this season.
Cheez-It Bowl, South Carolina versus Illinois. South Carolina just finished the season like on a freaking tear. They looked terrifying, and everybody was happy they didn't end up in the playoff. I'm going to say South Carolina on that one.
Yeah, I think you probably got to go with South Carolina here, as much as it pains me to pick against Burt. They got great momentum. You know, they beat Clemson, who's now in the playoff. They're just as tested as the Illini, but they've got more momentum going into the end of the season.
Yep.
So South Carolina.
Texas Bowl, Baylor versus LSU. I'm saying Baylor mostly because two teams I genuinely just hate. But I would say Baylor wins that over LSU.
Oh yeah, this is a tough one for me too. Yeah, I guess I'll go with Baylor.
Cool.
God, LSU. It feels like they're either going to win this game going away or they're going to get absolutely ran out of the stadium. It's tough to say which way it's going to swing, but I'll tentatively say Baylor gets it done.
All right, Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, Duke versus Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is going to just annihilate Duke. I guess their backup, or their starting quarterback transferred out, so like that's not a good sign. Ole Miss is already better than Duke anyway, so they're going to.
Yeah, and Lane Kiffin is pissed off.
Exactly.
Ole Miss wasn't taken seriously as a playoff contender, so it feels like he's one of these chip on his shoulder teams that has actually something to prove in an otherwise inconsequential bowl game. So I'll say Ole Miss too.
First Responder Bowl, North Texas versus Texas State. So that's fine. The First Responder Bowl is in Dallas, so like, good Lord, I don't care. North Texas, I guess. I
don't know anything about North Texas. I know Texas State was at least good enough at one point of the season that they were favored to beat Arizona State.
That's
so
fine.
I'll tentatively pick Texas State.
God.
But I've got, like you said, we're mostly picking on vibes for these. This is like less than vibes. I don't even know what the vibes are for this one.
It'd be like Akron versus like Toledo and like the Glass Bowl, and everybody's like, yeah, let's watch that. What are you talking
the Dayton
about?
Bowl.
That'd be sick. Duke's Mayo Bowl, Minnesota versus Virginia Tech. Minnesota's not going to win. They're going to do something stupid and screw.
Really?
Yeah.
I wanted to believe in Virginia Tech so bad, but
but Virginia, you know what? Virginia Tech just fired their defensive coordinator though. So maybe I do got to go Minnesota.
I wanted to believe in Virginia Tech against Clemson, and they
Yeah.
let me down. I'm not going to let them let me down again. I'm going with Minnesota.
All right, we're not going to do the college football playoff games because those are coming up, and those will be exciting. We'll talk all about that. Last one, though, one more Bahamas Bowl, supposedly in the Bahamas, Buffalo versus Liberty. I will never pick for Liberty ever. It's a fake university with a fake football team. Buffalo's going to beat them. It's going to be great.
I'll pick Liberty just because you didn't.
How dare you?
I don't believe in Maction. Sorry,
somebody's got to. Real quick before we get out of here, men's soccer fell in the Final Four. It's really sad. Obviously, a huge story with men's soccer. I mean, there's all the football stuff aside. I mean, the fact that they've been dealing with the off-campus shooting of Nathan Demian, like that. That's completely separate from all of that. So great that guy's in recovery and that he's doing okay. But yeah, that was really rough. So still, congratulations to that team on an incredible season, and all the best, obviously, to Nathan, and hopefully that he's going to be all right. And then finally, two more things that we got to do briefly. Heisman went to Travis Hunter over Ashton Genty. I'm fine with it. I don't care.
No,
it's fine. First of all,
I look, if there wasn't that massive propaganda push for Travis Hunter relative to just being a
he was the best cornerback in the country. He was one of the best wide receivers in the country. I can't think of a time anything remotely close to that has ever happened. I'm fine with him getting the Heisman. And Ashton Genty, they're like, oh, it might be Barry's record. Well, first of all, he's got 2 more games in which to do it in the regular season and an extra game at least in the playoff. And the record isn't the record because for some stupid reason, the NCAA only started counting bowl games towards your total season record in 2002. So Barry Sanders' true season record, because he got 222 games in his bowl or yards in his bowl game, is 2,850 yards. But Genty isn't even going to sniff. So
I don't think we're ever. If there was ever a season to give a G5 player a Heisman, it was this one. And I honestly don't think that we're ever going to see it now that we've just had this happen.
I don't hate that take.
I don't have anything personally against Travis Hunter, but it felt like a very, very forced campaign to get him to win this. I'm encouraged by the fact that the vote was as close as it was, that there was a legitimate argument for Genty to win. Right. And I think that he should have won. I'm not up in arms over the fact that he lost. I do think there was an argument for Hunter winning it. You just made it. I just think that the media climate around this was really unfair.
I think Ashton had 2 kind of mediocre games in the middle of the season, and that's what did him in, because then people stopped talking about him, and that was really the problem.
Oh, and Travis Hunter didn't have any mediocre games?
No, well, that's what I'm saying, though, because he did have mediocre games, but also he was the best cornerback all season. So people are like, oh, well, he didn't have a great receiving game, but he also caught an interception or whatever. Like, they could do that, and you couldn't do that for Ashton Genty. So, but either of them, I think, were deserving of the award. They both had incredible seasons, and I would have liked to see a G5 team or player win. I agree with that. Finally, Ohio State got destroyed by Auburn. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the basketball team, so we're going to have to talk about this at length on another show.
Yeah. We'll do that on a non-football week show.
Ross Bjork, you got to cut bait, dude.
Yeah, I hope it gets better, but early returns are bad. And,
who could have possibly seen it coming all the way back in April?
A lot of people.
Who could have a series of recorded audio shows
that could be
possibly
accessible.
Also video format in which they speculated on hiring Dusty May, who's now at Michigan. How's that team doing, by the way, as opposed to a guy with no head coaching experience that hasn't had to work the portal before.
Right. So we'll talk more about that. But yeah, Ohio State, they've got a lot of issues. And yes, Auburn's very good, but also Ohio State is
I'm very worried that we're going to see like the same pattern that we saw with Holtman last year relative to this team.
Yeah.
Well, no, relative to this team, like being passably good at home and then they go on the road and they just get skunked by
Right.
everybody. It doesn't matter who it is.
For me, the turning point on Holtman was where they, I think it was at Penn State, and they had a massive lead, like going to the half, and then just blew it, just completely. And then they did it again with the same. I think it was like an 18-point lead that they blew, and they did it twice last season.
I mean,
So I don't know,
this
man.
team has. I mean, this is now the second like horrifyingly bad road loss in almost as many weeks, including the performance against Maryland, and then their game against Texas A&M was equally miserable.
Yeah, pretty terrible.
This, not an encouraging start for road trips for this team this season, and I don't see how it gets any better based on how bad the margins of victory have been.
Yeah. Well, hopefully what happens in the shoe this weekend is much more encouraging. So we'll be talking about all of that next week. Should be very exciting. We'll get into all the whys and wherefores. We'll talk about all the other college football playoff games. And
we'll see if Ryan Day is still head coach by the next episode of the Dubcast.
Yeah, that'll be a fun one. So we'll see how it goes. And until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next week.
Take care, folks.